Hello, everyone. GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. It is time for our Friday recap episode. I am joined today by Gavin Purcell, Bonky Donk, here at Overpriced JPEGs. Everyone's used to you. You're now our other recurring guest aside from Zen. You're here every week.
I feel lucky to be in the comfort and the awareness of who Zeneca is. Like the fact that I get to be a recurring guest now too feels pretty good because Zeneca is a rock star in this space.
2 years in NFTs, Gavin. You finally made it.
Thank you.
Later in the show, I'm going to be joined by Charles Wayn, who is the co-founder of Galxe, which is a platform for building and engaging Web3 communities. They are also a sponsor of Overpriced JPEGs. But I was struck, they recently launched a campaign with Linea, which is a new zkEVM layer 2 that's been launched by Consensus, which is behind MetaMask. A lot of airdrop farmers like going hard, thinking that there may be a Linea token someday. And anyways, but they've launched this campaign with Linea that got like 1.5 million participants. Now, wow. I talked to Charles about like, how many bots are there? Because like anytime I hear a big number like that, I've like become the cynic that's like, is any of this real? The TLDR is I do think a lot of it is real and there are a lot of participants there, not probably 1.5 million, but still significant. So I thought that was really interesting. And they've worked with a lot of layer 2s in the past. So I just wanted to dive in with them a little bit on this recent campaign they're doing, what they've learned from it. And also they have a lot of international participants. And I'm trying to read up and learn a little bit more about some of the international markets. And so we dive into that just a little bit. That'll be at the end of the show. But for you and I, we're going to dive in here on some fun things. Ordinals. I'm becoming an ordinal person now. I of course feel like I'm a couple weeks late to the party, which I am, but it's finally happening. I mean, it's exciting me, and lots of other good stuff. So we'll dive in here in just a minute. But first, we do need to hear a word from our lovely sponsors, including Galxe. Y'all know, I think one of the most powerful use cases for NFTs are loyalty programs, which is why I'm so excited about our latest partner, Galxe. That's Galxe. Galxe is a leading platform for building a Web3 community. It is a no-code, plug-and-play solution to create task-based campaigns and loyalty programs. With over 67 million users, Galxe has worked with folks like Optimism, Polygon, Arbitrum, and more than 2,100 other partners with reward-based loyalty programs of their own. And I'm especially excited to announce their latest product offering, Galxe Mintlist. Mintlist enables NFT projects to issue allow lists based on different user profiles. It's free to use, and projects can then take advantage of Galaxy's other offerings, like Task and Quest, which incentivize audience growth and user retention in the long term. Go beyond the mint and keep using Galexe's infrastructure to reward users through on and off-chain actions. Galexe's goal is to help projects grow in an authentic way and help them retain their users and communities over the long haul. And as a user, you can start contributing to your favorite Web3 communities today, joining allow lists through Mintlist and earning rewards, NFTs, oats, tokens, and points. Go to Galxe.com right now, that's Galxe.com right now, or click the link in the show notes to get started. Your Web3 community is waiting. I am so excited to announce that this year, Overpriced JPEGs has partnered with OpenSea, the world's leading NFT marketplace, built for everyone, creators, collectors, noobs, and experts alike. I'm an OpenSea user because they have the best selection of NFTs and a truly inclusive view of the ecosystem, supporting 8 chains and 8 global languages. I trust the systems they've put in place to keep the space safe, like copyright protection, malicious URL detection and removal, robust verification, and more. It's why they are the place to buy, sell, and create NFTs. That's right. You know OpenSea, you use OpenSea, but did you know that OpenSea now has drops? New exclusive projects launch every week from top projects and creators, and you can check them out now using the link in the show notes. They also recently introduced self-serve drops, which is in beta, and allows creators to launch their projects right on OpenSea. This drops product gives creators access to tools like rich storytelling drop pages, multi-chain support, and drop mechanic customization. The full launch for self-serve drops is coming this spring. So check out the upcoming drops on OpenSea right now using the link in the show notes and own what moves you. You'll also be supporting the show in the process. All right, Gav, let's vibes check here. How you doing? How you feeling? Where's the market at?
I am feeling okay. I think that it's weird. We are in such a weird place. I feel like in some ways, like I am going through a continual emotional roller coaster when it comes to the NFT market, especially where
has it ever not been that way, though?
I mean, I feel like there have been more consistent ups and more consistent downs, and I feel like right now obviously we're in a down, and I think maybe when you're in a down, the ups give you some sort of hope, and then you realize, oh, this is still a down, and you're not really going to be in that good of place for a while, right? Like, I think that's the tricky thing is like, I think the consistency, there was a moment where, like, late last year, early this year, where you felt like, okay, this is a down, I can pay attention, but there's really not a lot going on. And then there was some stuff going on. And now it doesn't seem like it's going on as much. It's like this up and down. And then some projects will come out of the blue, and then you'll be like, what was that? And then you're like, but there's no other project like that comes afterwards. And it's just so strange.
So we'll talk about what's it called? The board punks in a second, because that's the perfect example of that right now. But you know what you need to get into, Gav?
Ordinals?
Ordinals! This is where the life is.
Yes,
this is where the life is. Honestly, I'm about to become a Bitcoin podcaster. I'm going to be talking about shit like, fiat and I don't know. I mean, I'm going to talk about fiat, but like whatever the Bitcoin maxis talk about, like sound money and the gold standard. And I'm going to become one of those. I'll start. Anyways,
you have those giant open mouth YouTube pictures. Where I'd be like,
yes, exactly. That's my new calling in life. All jokes aside, I did an interview with Leonidas yesterday, who's big in the ordinal ecosystem, and it'll air next week or, next week by the time you're hearing this probably, or potentially this week, depending on when you hear this. And man, I'm kind of jazzed. It really does feel like earlier days of NFTs.
I said this to Carly yesterday, but for everybody, like I learned about them early on. Like it's a tricky thing, but it's like it's the same sort of thing that I have to keep beating myself. I was gonna say I gotta stop beating myself up, but I have to beat myself up for this, which is like I learn about these things and I kind of know about them. And a couple friends of mine went in on one very early one that was not super cheap. It wasn't crazy expensive, but like we are like I have a share of one that's like in the sub 10,000 range and actually sub 5,000, which is kind of cool. Who knows if it will be worth anything, but like I think the interesting thing is the whole Bitcoin wallet thing drove me insane for a while, and then somebody figured it out, and now I've heard the Bitcoin wallets are really good. And of course, the thing that always was interesting. What's that?
Xverse, I think, is the big one.
That's right.
Now.
That's right. And I think the big thing that was always interesting about the ordinal space is, and we've talked about this too, that there's so much unlock of financial ability in that space. And I don't want to sound like a gross trader or that's the entire thing, but so many people in Bitcoin had just put money to kind of put in there. And, Bitcoin is this thing, sound money, all this stuff we talked about, but there is a lot of money locked up in Bitcoin, a lot of actual income and cash that's there that even if a small percentage of it gets unlocked, that is just a giant amount of money that could be traded back and forth amongst people if ordinals become a thing. So, and they are a thing, but it's just not like a thing. Yeah.
You're like, yes,
that's what I want.
Happening.
Yeah.
There's actually like, there's shit happening there. There's life. Yeah. It's fun. It's also just like, it feels fresh, even though it's not like any of the concepts at the highest level are actually new, but it's a new frontier on which it's happening. And it excites me because there's like art happening on there, and the blend of high value assets, on the Bitcoin network is interesting. Like, I don't think we necessarily get the emergence of your classic like PFP utility. I mean, I don't think that's where this goes, or at least that's not what's exciting to me about it. Feels like everything I've learned about Ethereum NFTs for the last few years has led me to the conclusion of like the surest bet, and I feel like everyone's landed here, right, is art blocks. It's just like interesting new waves of art. And that on Bitcoin is actually quite interesting. So I don't want to belabor this point up at the top because we'll talk about it a little bit later with what OnChainMonkeys is doing, which I really commend them for. And we can talk about it there. But as we talk about vibes check, like my vibes are back because I feel like I have this new playground that I'm starting to dive into. Your point about the UX having been terrible when it first launched is so true. And I whiffed so hard on this where like in an old episode in February when ordinals were first like popping a little bit, and like I think January was basically when I feel like they were really discovered even. Discovered being kind of the wrong word, but I was like, I was so skeptical because I thought that an NFT community wouldn't develop on Bitcoin because Bitcoin maxis and the true Bitcoin folks are so opposed to NFTs.
You underestimated the desire for money, Carly. This is the desire for money will drive anybody everywhere. I
underestimated the extent to which ETH NFT traders would go, and Solana NFT traders and these other chain NFT fans would move to Bitcoin.
Yeah. I
And
mean, part of me thinks it's a narrative shift, right? Like, I think that a lot of smart projects, including, to Gods and a bunch of other places, and Yuga even launched Bitcoin ordinal versions of some collection of theirs because they realized there was a narrative there, right? And they realized this thing. So I do think like part of it is just like the same thing of our world here about like following a narrative, right? And the narrative now is in this place, but it's still interesting. I think you're right. We can talk more about it later, but like the store of art is a really interesting use case there, I feel like.
Well, let's just talk about it now. We're talking about vibes check, and this is like what's driving my vibes right now. So let's talk about OnChainMonkeys. You're mentioning all these projects. DeGods obviously went over, and I agree with you that it's a narrative play, but to me, it's a narrative that could have some legs. Like there's so many in a decade-long sense, right?
Yes.
Not just like a narrative that plays right now. Like Goblin Town is a great example. And Goblin Town may have long-term legs because it was such a cultural moment for NFTs. But I think that's an example of it played on a narrative and a meta that was you knew was short-term. Now, again, whether the significance of them capitalizing on that moment means that they have like long-term staying power, who knows? But the narrative here is like, Bitcoin is, even to somebody like me who's a huge Ethereum fan, Bitcoin has a certain cachet and premiumness. And it is, of course, nobody's going to deny that the most decentralized, the most immutable, like all those things, it has a lock on. And when you pair that with art and fine art, that's very interesting. I think the best example is, and we talked about this yesterday, and I talked about this in the podcast with Leonidas, but Peter Schiff, who is like an economist, a well-known absolute Bitcoin hater, just has been saying for years that Bitcoin was going to go to zero, partnered with an artist to launch they're technically called digital artifacts, and that's a thing I learned as well. But launched what also we would maybe colloquially call an ordinal or an inscription, because he actually likes the idea of digital art on a blockchain, and he thinks the idea of a blockchain ledger for art makes sense. He doesn't think it makes sense as a currency. So like blockchain, like Bitcoin as like a currency. And can we
introduce him to Ethereum? Like I'd also like to introduce him to Ethereum.
Yeah. Have you heard what's been happening for the last literally 3 years that now everybody's making fun of us for? But that aside, like I think that reflects, again, the reality, which is that there's a premiumness to Bitcoin, and putting art on it is very interesting. Okay, OnChainMonkeys. Everybody probably is familiar with that project. It's been an Ethereum-based project. It's an all on-chain Ethereum project. There's a handful of these. I talk about Avastars very frequently on the show as having been an early pioneer of that. Anonymize is a good one. You're a big Anonymize fan. Cyber brokers, others, OnChainMonkey being another example of that. Danny, who's one of their co-founders, has been a long time developer in the space. I mean, he was working in Bitcoin back in 2013, like old school crypto, nerd dude, right?
And they've got an amazing community. OnChainMonkey, like they go hard. Do you know what I mean? Like they are supportive, they are amazing, and you see them everywhere. Like they are a supportive community of each other.
Yes. I'm interviewing the team in 2 weeks, which will be fun. That's been like one of those conversations that I think I've dropped the ball on, but like it's like been back and forth for probably a year at this point of like, we need to get you on, and we're finally making it happen. So, but they just launched, what are they called? Dimensions, I think, or Dimension Ordinals, OnChainMonkey Dimensions, which are 300 digital artifacts, right, over on Bitcoin. And
by the way, that name remains, but it's like, I've been playing Diablo, which is a big video game, right? And like a digital artifact sounds like a thing that you would unearth in like, Mass Effect, the video game. It's like, I got 15 digital artifacts. Can I trade them in for 3 rare digital artifacts and 1 legendary digital artifact? Like, I don't know if I love that name, but it's fine. It's fine.
It's awful. I mean, I'm trying to avoid rehashing everything I rehashed with Leonidas, which is the episode that's going to air after this episode airs.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny. I recorded it before this episode, but I'm releasing it after. But like, I made that joke too. Like, I remember a John Carlo tweet that I loved back in like February, where he was like, 2022 us, like, we really need to find another term for non-fungible token. Like, it's just not accessible enough. 2023, best I can do is encrypted ordinals or ordinal inscriptions. It's like,
exactly.
Dope. Yeah, we're killing it. And and I learned this yesterday, right? Which is the there's a difference between the inscription, the ordinal, and then when you put them together, that's when you get the digital artifact
on the sats and all that
Satoshi,
stuff.
It's when the Satoshi when ordinal theory has been applied to the Satoshi, then it's an ordinal, and then the inscription is like the art in the ledger, and then the pairing of the art in the ledger with the ordinal is when you get the.
Why is the mainstream not here, Carly? Why is the mainstream not here?
Wait, that's exactly what Leonidas explained what I just explained to me, and that's literally the joke I made to him, and I said the exact same thing. I was like, God, why haven't we gone mainstream yet?
I mean, listen, I will say real fast, like there is a thing where the nerds, and I count myself as a nerd because again, going back to anonymized, that's what got me into this space hardcore. Was
you don't need to explain why you're a nerd, Gavin. You're literally on the podcast.
Oh my God, come on.
Very
now.
clear.
Yeah.
Very
come
clear
on
that you're
now.
a nerd.
Yeah. This is what gets people excited, right? Going back to how you're excited, like I think one of the reasons people thought excited about this space was technology. And this is a new technology that feels like people are excited about it. So like to me, that gets me going in a really cool way, right? Like that makes me feel like something. I see what you're saying now. Like there's something interesting about like the feeling of learning something new, something actually new in this space. Yeah.
Yes. And even though, again, high level concepts, it's all the same, right? It's an NFT. And from a layman's perspective, if any of this stuff is ever going to take off, that's all going to be abstracted away. No one's going to know any of those terms. But for us who are here early, like it's fun as shit. This is the kind of stuff we like.
I'm still mad about you telling everybody I don't need to describe that I'm a nerd.
You're on this podcast.
I'm just kidding.
I'm trying to think of I had Ashley Benson, who is like a very famous actress on this podcast. Probably not a nerd. Yeah, I don't know that anybody else who's ever frequented been on this podcast is not a nerd.
No, you're right. This is about as nerdy of a podcast as you can get, probably.
We are a niche within a niche within a niche, all of which niches subcategories are nerdy sub niches. So
you're right. I've never thought about that before. It's like you're peeling apart. Some nerds were probably looking down at us and saying, "Well, those people are super nerds." You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're the nerds among the nerds.
Exactly.
Okay, so getting us back to OnChainMonkeys. The important thing to understand, and I don't want to dive too deep into this because again, we'll get into it in depth on the episode on Wednesday that comes out. But there's basically been this change, or there's been this, I don't know, breakthrough on the ordinal side, which is something called recursions. And recursions basically just means that you can call functions from other inscriptions in doing your inscription. Again, watch the Wednesday episode where Leonidas describes it well.
That's
but the
interesting,
basic premise is it makes it cheaper and easier to release art to make ordinals. Like it's been pretty expensive relative to Ethereum or other networks to actually to do an ordinal. Like it's thousands of dollars. Yeah. And so this recursion process brings that cost down, which makes it more accessible. And then you can start doing more complicated things like generative art things. And so OnChainMonkey, it's 300, or dimensions, I should say, it's 300 inscriptions. They're also all on early Satoshis, like early blocks, which is meaningful if you're deep in this ecosystem. It's like a way that folks determine rarity, and that's a whole other thing we won't, again, fully go down because we talk about it on Wednesday. But the big thing here that I think is really cool is that they've basically uploaded these like libraries that now can be leveraged and used by other artists.
Right.
So this is opening a door for other art to start emerging on Bitcoin, and because it'll be cheaper now, because OnChainMonkeys basically fronted the cost to get all this stuff up, and now because of this recursion process, other folks can leverage it and use it. And so I think you are potentially on the precipice of more interesting art coming out on Bitcoin ordinals, more generative art. You know, they had like an after mint reveal, which apparently folks did not think was going to be possible on Bitcoin, and then they have now made that happen on OnChainMonkeys. So like, I actually think it's a really interesting time to tune in to ordinals. Yep. Because you're about to get better stuff. Like a lot of what's existed on ordinals up to this point is very just like simple pixel stuff because it is so expensive to try and do this whole process, and it's block space heavy, and you have limited block space, all these things. But that's changing a little bit now. So anyway, we'll go deeper on all of this stuff next Wednesday. But I'm excited about it. And that was something that happened this week from OnChainMonkeys, and excited to talk to their team for sure.
That's great. I mean, listen, you got me excited. So you got this nerd excited. Yeah, there we go. One nerd down. Our listenership to go. I'm curious how many people who listen to this show have already been into ordinals. Okay, other things in kind of our vibe check worlds.
Well, let's do board punks. This is an example of like such a contrast to me of ordinals because this is the shit that like just does not excite me anymore.
Well,
But
I
give
just
me
can't
the
believe
TLDR.
it. I was just the basic TLDR is another anonymous project that came out. It is literally a ape and punk derivative, which is like the thing that we thought we saw 1,001 of that was in existence, and unfortunately not another one. But the interesting thing about this one, which this is the funny thing now, it's like this is what I was kind of saying at the beginning. It's like this went to I think it was a very cheap mint. I don't know if it was a free mint, but it went to 0.15, which is like a lot of money for.
Yeah, it was like under point. It was like over. It was like cheaper than 0.01. I think it was like
very cheap, very cheap mint.
Yeah.
And then, but what it jumped up to 0.15, and I think there's just such a desperate feeling for people to want to do what they used to do. When I say what they used to do, which is the buy, flip, and be like, yay, I made some money, yay. And guess what now, everybody? Like we've said on this podcast before, there are people much smarter, much more savvy, and sometimes much more immoral than you in the world that are doing this on top of you, right? That are using you as exit liquidity. And I don't mean this in a way that like every project's like
state.
this. Yes, but yes, it's the deep state. It's the
deep
nerd
state.
deep state. Listen up, people. I want to tell you what's going on in the NFT world. This is a real thing. Watch out for more bunks.
If you're not watching the video, watch the video to just watch Gavin's face on that moment. Go to YouTube and watch this part. Yeah, this is what the deep state is spending their time worrying about. We all think it's like some CIA plot to get like Trump reelected. They're actually just pulling the strings on board punks.
Okay, board punks. So these are a very like again. This is the thing where like I remember being sick of these in March of 2022. Do you know what I mean? Like there was a moment where
nobody asked for this.
No, nobody. That's exactly right. Nobody asked for this. By the way, the art is okay. It's fine. But at this point, like you're doing and I don't know enough in my mind in some ways, if this was a team that was just like, look, we're going to do the dumbest thing possible. That's kind of interesting. But like, it doesn't play out that way. And then people get stuck holding the bag and now they're back down at 0.04. And like, I feel like in a world where like lots of stuff is popping, this kind of thing is fine and I don't mind it. But now I just kind of get mad about it. And it's like, I saw this project going off and I was like, I kind of was like, oh, whatever. And it's not, even if I had bought in where I first saw it, I probably could have made something off of it, but it's not worth it right now. Like, and that's the part that bums me out a little. It's like, this is coming back down, right? Like, I mean, I think the last thing I was excited about was Nakamigos, and even Nakamigos came back down. And then, all of this stuff feels like it's just so ephemeral right now. And it just is tricky to do anything.
It's pulling the slot. It's literally just pulling the slot at the slot machine or pulling the whatever lever.
You're pulling the slot, except somebody else pulled the slot before you and might be handing you something.
Well, the house always wins, right? You're playing against the house, it feels like.
Yeah.
And again, the house is the NSA. So, you're not going to be just kidding. The NSA is not trading NFTs. Okay,
Come on back and tell us what the NSA is doing.
Other quick hits here at the top that I want to talk about, and then I'm really excited to dive in. Well, I have to dive in deeper myself, but on these Hinman documents, I don't know if folks have been tracking
fascinating,
before,
right?
We'll talk about that a little bit. But Adidas and FEWOCiOUS announced their partnership. Folks had knew something like this was coming for a little while. I love this. So I love this primarily because I have FEWO Paint, and so I think I get a cheaper access price to buying the pass that I can ultimately trade in for my sneaks.
That's
so great. I'm excited, and I love FEWO's art, and I love them on a sneaker, and it's all good.
Can we get more stories like FEWO again? That's what I would like, is like to bring that part of NFTs back, because like that story was just so cool, and it was just so great to see like a young person be super awesome as an artist, but then also just like what that world was like. It felt like NFTs like were changing lives back then, and now we're talking about board punks. You know what I mean?
Get ordinals, baby. One word.
Ordinals. Okay.
Ordinals. I think it's going to change lives. So, no.
What about board? How can we do boardinals? Could you and I do boardinals? Boardinals?
Oh my God! Yes, you've cracked the code. Blending all the. No, actually,
let me tell you, I got a new project. It's called Boardinals.
Good Lord. Yeah, maybe. No, but FEWO was one of my favorite interviews I did. I loved interviewing.
He's the best.
So smart and interesting and fun,
joyful,
and compelling content. Let's get FEWO back in the pod. Anyways, yes, excited about this Adidas collab. The sneakers are doing stuff, right? It's like sneakers are sneakering. The other quick hit here at the top, the Meme Land Waitlist.
Yep.
What did they really? You know this better than I do. Give me the.
So basically, they've confirmed meme, the token meme, and I think what's funny in some ways to me about Meme Land's token is that, remember when you interviewed Ray, it was always like, this is utility token, blah blah blah, but like they're doing everything they can kind of on their side to kind of, it's a token, you know what I mean? Like it's gonna do well, and so what's going on is, in fact, I have a captain and I forgot, I haven't done anything with these yet, so I guess I should figure it out. But like I think every captain's got. I'm staking it, yeah. So I am staking it.
Oh, okay. So you're gonna be fine. Yeah.
No. I mean, but every captain's got 5 of these codes basically to give out to people, or to. So basically, this is a way to get an early access, to be able to get on the waitlist to get the token at launch, right? So it's an interesting play. I think again, this is the smartest thing is that we've said Ray knows how to play the strings of the market very well. He understands, or people that work for him, I think both probably understand very well, like what gets people talking. And these have been going, these codes over the counter have been going for like 0.05, which is like, is not a lot, but it's not nothing. You know what I mean? If you get 5 of them, that's 0.25 if you give them all away. And like, no one knows how meme's going to do, but like, it's probably got a pretty good shot in that, like it's been around for a bit. And I think it's probably going to do pretty well. So it's interesting. I mean, again, I just think it's like, Ray, whether he planned this or not, or whether Meme Land planned this or not, they have had literally a year-long rollout of their project, and it feels executed really well, right? There's very few. Now, granted, there have been mistakes along the way, as we've written in our newsletter, but they've done a good job of understanding what those mistakes are and readdressing them, and then
for it.
Exactly.
Half of this is just like calm, like this calm style, and Ray's funny, like he's internet funny.
Yep.
And I'm starting to get 9gag content on Instagram for the first time. I must know that I now like follow 9gag, for totally unrelated purposes, but the algorithm doesn't know that. So like now I'm getting fed 9gag content. They know how to play the internet. They're internet people. And that's the key. Do you know, God, I'm trying to remember if Ray and I talked about this in the podcast, what the strategy is for folks in the US. Like I know Ray's whole point is like, we don't have to worry about this. I'm based in Hong Kong. Who gives a shit? But like,
I actually have no idea. And it's a tricky thing, right? Because I think that I don't have an answer for that, but like, I don't really know what the answer is.
Yeah. Well, this actually, so speaking of that, and obviously speaking about the regulatory shenanigans, some interesting documents were unsealed this week as part of the ongoing Ripple court case. Yeah. And basically this judge required that these like tons of documents, I think, and email threads and a bunch of stuff from the SEC be released. And so there was a lot of anticipation around this, and one document in particular was like a draft version of a speech that the former director of the SEC, Hinman, what's his name? William Hinman.
Billy. I call him Billy.
Oh, do they actually, or are you kidding?
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
I call him Billy. He's my buddy. Billy.
You're like a well-connected guy, so I was like, there's a very decent chance. Gav's just like buddies with Billy Hinman, I mean, I guess you're more Hollywood connected. I text Gavin when I need. I'm like, there's like a celebrity piece of like celebrity gossip that I want more insight on. So I'm like, Gav,
and I don't ever have it, right?
You've never given me anything valuable, but I'm like, who of your friends can you text to help me understand the Taylor Swift and Joel Alwyn breakup a little bit better, because I'm really confused with everything right now. He gave me nothing, by the way. Okay, so I think that the top line here is there's a lot of legal stuff going on, or there's a lot that's been broken down, and there's some tweet threads breaking all this down, and I would need to spend more time with it, honestly, to be able to really digest it, because I'm not a lawyer, and to really go through all of this. My understanding is at a top level, I don't know if this is a massive win for Ripple's case. Like Ripple and other coins aren't mentioned, at least in this speech, certainly, but I think in these broader documents are more talking about Bitcoin and Ether. They're several years old. So they're not saying anything specifically related to quote unquote altcoins. So it's not necessarily a direct win for Ripple, but it certainly is, broadly speaking, a win for crypto. Yeah. Arguably a win for Ether. And because it puts Gary in kind of a weird spot, because it is documents in which very clearly senior people at the SEC are saying they don't believe Ethereum is a security. And I think the important piece of this is something that jumped out at me because of my conversation with Karen Ubell last week. And for folks who didn't go watch that on our recap episode last week, I interviewed Karen, who's a partner at a law firm, specializes in blockchain law, but was also an SEC attorney for 6 years. So she worked at the SEC. So I'm going to read this line from this Hinman speech, and then I want to tie it to something that Karen said last week. Okay, so at one point, Hinman says, putting aside, so it says, it starts with the word and putting aside the fundraising that accompanied the creation of Ether, based on my understanding of the present state of Ether, the Ethereum network and its decentralized structure, current offers and sales of Ether are not securities transactions. So I think what's really important about this is this was a point that Karen was making last week that I only partially understood, but this actually makes me understand it better. She was saying the Howey test and the securities tests are facts and circumstance tests. And facts and circumstances can change over time. So like at an initial, when you're initially fundraising, like the Ethereum Foundation is fundraising for Ether, they are issuing investment contracts to early investors, and that is a security. But at this point now, Ether, this decentralized network in which all sorts of different people are working to build on something where the Ethereum Foundation itself is not directly selling to people. It's not like you're buying these from the Ethereum Foundation every time you buy Ethereum. Like those facts and circumstances are entirely different from what the facts and circumstances were when the Ethereum Foundation founded this coin, whatever it was at this point, 8-9 years ago. And so that was Karen Ubell's point, and this seems to back that point up and say the SEC fully had that understanding of this back in the day. And this apparently this concept is called morphing, and like the idea that securities morph. And this speech that everyone's talking about, this William Hinman speech, was originally titled like digital asset security morphing or something. Like it was focused entirely on this idea that something could have been a security at its very inception and has subsequently not become a security. And that nuance is uncomfortable because the SEC now under Gary clearly does not want to engage with something nuanced like that, because it really does complicate their case. And frankly, if they ever try and say that ETH specifically is a security, obviously right now they're focused on these altcoins and things and Solana and others, but like that's obviously a major coin, but you get what I'm saying. It's not Ethereum or Bitcoin. Like that, he'd be kind of arguing that it's like morphed back, because there's now evidence that within the last decade, the SEC said that in its state it wasn't a security. So now are you trying to argue that it's morphed again so that it is a security? And some people would say, well, now it's proof of stake versus proof of work, but that's also such a silly argument in my opinion. Like proof of stake is utility, right? It's securitizing the network. Like it has such a utility outside of. So anyway,
I am so interested in this space because I mean, one of the things that drew me in, like we said earlier, was decentralization, right? And I think it's clear to me that like, whether Ethereum or, whether Ethereum started as a centralized entity in a quote unquote central, I know it was never centralized, but like the idea that there was a place that started at the Ethereum Foundation.
It was more centralized, right? Like it absolutely was. And that's, again, back with the intention always of it becoming decentralized.
Yes. So my thing is like Ethereum is so clearly not a security because of this reason. And again, it goes back to what you said in that interview too, which is like, you can go to the Ethereum Foundation, but like, there's so many other people that are now like, you'd have to try to get to like who own this thing that you don't know who they are, where they are, all this sort of stuff. And like Solana and more centralized things seem like they have a trickier pathway here because there is a world where they could be centralized.
So this is what's interesting about this argument. And this is where I think where Ripple may try and use this in their case, which is if they have an intention to become more decentralized over time, like most things start more centralized and then decentralize.
Sure.
And those facts and like that would allow that any of these tokens, like a Solana or anything that is maybe more centralized, can sufficiently work to becoming decentralized and no longer be a security, which is a very funky dynamic to be in.
Yeah.
And I don't know how it plays out, or I don't know how a judge feels about that, or if then suddenly there's like parameters like, okay, great, well then you need to be sufficiently decentralized within the next year, or like I don't know how that would work, but that's interesting. It's like if this precedent is upheld as true, like there's this morphing process. Do you register as a security initially and then 2 years later you don't? And this also this has been something I've been really frustrated by listening to people that I like in the quote unquote mainstream media covering the Coinbase SEC thing, saying things like these companies should just be registering. They could just register as securities. Like Ethereum can't. Who is registering?
That's what I'm saying. Exactly.
Like
yes.
You can't actually play within the existing laws.
Yes.
I'm not an expert on what you need to fill out, the forms you need to fill out to register as a security, but I know that you have to put the name of the entity
Yeah.
the enterprise that is like issuing the security. And you cannot at all say that there is like one entity issuing Ethereum at this point. That's a ridiculous, or Ether, like that's a ridiculous claim.
I mean, I think this is where, I mean, probably everyone listening to this podcast knows this, but like this is where decentralization is super unique and where it's changed this entire space is that like it's different than every other company right now. That's what I was saying is there probably are some of these tokens which are, you know, much more like stock offerings in some ways than they are like Ethereum. But Ethereum is fully decentralized and it is impossible now to get that sort of connective tissue to one like specific place that like is the place that's going to be, we are the main thing. So I think there is going to be some serious funkiness here. Now, the other thing about this was always interesting to me is like, we've been through this process now of like Coinbase is like semi-excited because they're going to get some sort of argument or some sort of like, you know, discovery on what
action. We just
forcing action. Yes.
We just want to move this issue forward.
But point. Also, like, we all know that legal things last years, right? So this could just be another thing that lets us drag this thing out for a lot longer, for all we know.
I was going to say, we're going to find out more on the Ripple case probably by the end of the year. Like, there's going to be some movement on that because we're starting to get to that point in the case. And, I am speaking in vagaries here because I don't know. There's some specific things that are upcoming that I couldn't speak to them well. But, like, that case has been ongoing for years. And we're getting kind of close. And you see that in the price action of Ripple, right? Like, it jumped another 10% with the release of these documents. Even though, again, really this doesn't necessarily super strengthen their case. It's certainly not bad for it. It's good for crypto overall, but it'll be interesting to see how their lawyers use this. But I do think we'll get more information on the XRP case this year, which is interesting,
which
and obviously
good.
That becomes a harbinger of maybe what's going to come out of the Coinbase situation. Because XRP is the kind of token that Coinbase is trading that the SEC is claiming makes them
it's the canary in the coal mine too, right? Yeah, it's like
for sure.
Yeah.
Let me introduce you to a brand new company that I could not be more excited about, Web3 Sense. A Web3 analytics platform that combines on-chain data with social media insights to give you the deepest, most meaningful intelligence into any NFT community. I have tested other analytics platforms out there, but Web3 Sense has the most comprehensive capabilities I've seen in the NFT ecosystem. They apply sophisticated data science to wallet histories to determine behavioral patterns and help shape predictive analytics. In other words, they can tell you which Twitter accounts are actually the influencers in your space. And they can tell you what resonates most within a community by looking at what other communities token holders are involved in. The number of use cases here is virtually unlimited. So whether you're a trader, creator, institution, brand, agency, I promise Web3 Sense has data that you want to see with the deep and actionable insights that you need to build, analyze, grow, start, whatever you want to do within the NFT space and in terms of building a business and a community. Now, they are still in very early days, so they're eager to connect with the community. So if you're interested in learning more about what Web3 Sense can do for you and your business, and you should be, go and fill out the very short form linked to in the show notes, and someone from their team will reach out with more information and an opportunity for a product demo. Trust me, you won't regret it. Y'all know I love Ledger, the world leader in critical digital asset security. When you own crypto, what you actually own is a private key that gives you access to your coins. It is imperative that you keep this key safe, and Ledger wallets are the best way to do that. The Nano S Plus and Nano X Ledger wallets, paired with the Ledger Live app, give you the best way to start your crypto journey while maintaining full control over your digital assets. Send and sign your NFT transactions with full transparency in the Ledger Live app. What you see is what you sign. And y'all have heard me talk about Ledger Stacks before. Well, due to unprecedented demand, Ledger has received all the Ledger Stacks pre-orders that it can fulfill through summer 2023. And so they have decided to pause the pre-orders. Ledger is incredibly grateful for the community's support and is working hard to get current pre-orders out and ready to ship so that they can make even more Ledger Stacks to keep your digital assets secure. Sign up for the Ledger Stacks waitlist and be the first to know when Ledger Stacks are available again for pre-orders. But don't leave your digital assets susceptible to breach or hack in the meantime. Order your Nano S Plus or Nano X today by visiting shop.ledger.com or clicking the link in the show notes. So that's some good news. I will say we also... the Fed did what everyone expected at their latest meeting, which is that they're no longer hiking interest rates.
Yeah.
Which is, again, it was expected, but it's good news. I mean, they said they may have to start them again because inflation is inflating and it seems to be persisting, and they combat it with these interest rate hikes. The only thing I would say is crypto didn't really pump on the news. Like, that's good news. broadly, but like tech stocks pumped, and like the stock market pumped on the news, and like crypto is sort of, I mean, at least it stayed flat. I mean, ETH's been down a bit, but like, you would want it to have a little rally, and it didn't.
I think there was some people got spooked a little bit around the Binance and Coinbase stuff. I will say there was an interesting story that came out at very first thing this morning, which was that BlackRock is working now supposedly on a Bitcoin ETF, which is like a pretty big deal conceivably. So
haven't they been working on one?
I mean, I think it's actually
conversation in like 2021 was like the Bitcoin ETF. I would be shocked if they're able to get that through with everything that the SEC is doing right now. I mean, I don't know who has to approve an ETF. I'm assuming it's the SEC though.
BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, reportedly on the brink of submitting an application for a Bitcoin ETF. Where's the reportedly? Yeah, it's coming from CoinDesk. So, I
mean, there's the great file. They're not going to get it through. Is my thing.
There you go. That's it. Yeah.
I mean, again, this was a conversation back in 2021. It never happened. I think you can file it, but it's the DCCP. Okay, gives the CFTC exclusive jurisdiction to regulate the trading of digital commodities. Okay, I understand that, but SEC. Yeah, SEC. SEC approves Bitcoin futures ETF. This was back in October 2021. I think and again, we're all, this is not my, obviously, like area of expertise, so to speak, but I'm pretty sure the SEC would have to
approve that too. Yes.
A Bitcoin ETF.
Which at this point, maybe they're never going to.
No chance that they're approving a Bitcoin. I'm sure, obviously, BlackRock is a smart firm with a lot of smart lawyers and smart people working on this. So there's some, they're filing it now, and then who knows what they'll do to try and push it forward. But I don't see that actually coming to fruition.
No, what I was going to say is the thing that's kind of frustrating about the crypto thing is that I just feel like, again, going back to what I said at the beginning, we're in this tenuous place, right? Like where the 0% interest rates is a bull sign for economy wise that like seems like it's recovering a little from where it was, even if we never went into a recession, which is probably a good thing. When I say bull sign, I mean it's the early stage bull sign, right? Actually, when you're cutting interest rates, it's like, everything's slowing down a little bit, so we want to kind of speed it up a little. That's a good early sign for a bull market. The question just becomes is crypto trustworthy to the world at large? And I think the SEC stuff is really weighing on it in a significant way. I think if the SEC stuff had not happened with Binance, I think weirdly Binance, the Coinbase thing is important, obviously, but the Binance thing is the thing in my mind that keeps coming back, because Binance, and I know, please don't come at me, Binance maxis, but like Binance has this kind of like FTX-ish vibe a little bit more than Coinbase does. And that's the thing. Like, even
they're actually being accused of mishandling customer funds. Like Coinbase is being accused of being an illegal exchange and broker dealer and bullshit. But it's all like kind of like semantic,
based on things they've known. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. The Binance thing had like real fraud accusations to it. And like CZ has direct access to customer funds in the US, and they're commingling company funds with customer funds. Now, there was pushback, and I think Binance actually just had, or CoinDesk, there was like a headline that Binance had some sort of win. I mean, it's so early, so I don't know. But yes, of course, yes, I agree, because there is that kind of vibe to the accusations. But honestly, I agree with you in the sense that like maybe that's causing more harm. I just think anybody not deep in this world, they're not even paying attention to the nuance of it at this point, right? Like all they see is the headline, like the SEC's after all of them. Yeah. And they just kind of go to this place of like, it's all just fucked. Like it's all collapsed. It's done. Now the regulators are coming for it. It's done. And they're just writing it all off because it's just all to them over.
Which is kind of like with the ICO times, right? If you're remembering that was like a thing where in the mainstream it was like it just became this thing of, oh, it's done. Crypto's over. Like the ICOs, like everybody got scammed, and it's clearly just a thing. And then it came back stronger than ever, and then it just, so it's like it's one of those things where like it's again narrative, right? Like it's a part of it is like, what is a narrative like? Obviously, it's trickier now. I know a lot of people in this space who have said like, look, it might be over, which is always like an interesting thing to say, because like, it might be over for you. You might be done with it, and that's okay, right? If it's over for you and you want to be done with it, that's fine. But like, it's not over. You know what I mean? Like, there's all sorts of things that are going to come out of it still. And I do believe that like in the long term, it's a huge, huge win because of where the economy of the world is going in general. So we'll see.
Anytime I go back to first principles on this stuff, or even just go back to like the Bitcoin founding, like there's something that just feels so meaningful to it as a breakthrough
Yeah.
that it's just so hard to not imagine that it does become transformative over the next, let's give a really broad time frame and say century. Like, you know what I mean? There, and I think that's the thing that I just have to hold on to. Like, digital ownership makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, and so the US may be done for in it, and you know, a few of us use it in like a VPN sense, but like, so anyways, we'll see. We all know this at a high level. We'll see what happens. Last topic, and then I think we'll cut to my interview with Charles. This Ape DAO stuff.
I will say the funniest
special
thing
council,
to me.
what is it? It's like special council elections. What are they called? It's like the Ape DAO council elections.
We don't have to spend a crazy amount of time on this, but the funniest thing to me is seeing like the documents they put out, which is like, it's like this very kind of important like system of like who the people in charge are. And it's just these dumb pictures of Bored Apes representing these people in important positions. By the way, again, Bored Apes people don't come for me, but like, it's just goofy to me that like we have these like PFPs that are representing people in charge of billions of dollars of money. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me. But I mean, listen, I think you can pay those people whatever you want, right? Like it's like it's up to the community. It's a decentralized, it's a DAO, and it's trying to figure out how they pay the people. I mean, it's decentralized government is freaking messy. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm not convinced. I know again, I feel like I'm gonna have people coming after me after this podcast, but like I'm not convinced DAOs are the best way to manage anything. Do you know what I mean at this point?
I've been saying this since like very early. I've been saying it like earlier than I felt like you could. It feels like it's easier to say it now. And I think there's places for it to an extent.
I guess.
But like really,
what are those places? What do you think those places are? Because I'm kind of curious to know like where it works.
I think you can't have like just totally pure DAO style, complete decentralization. Like obviously, but I think the people who are like believers in DAOs agree with that. I think what you can have is you can have a certain level of like coordinated action with elected representatives within a group.
Sure.
You know, and then like systems that say, hey, this kind of a task is worth this kind of a bounty. I don't think you ever achieve a lot or huge scale that way. I just don't. Or like some of these people who are doing kind of DAO style things on the creative side. Like I've pushed back on things. Like I think StoryCo is an example of it. It was like used to be called Story DAO or whatever. But you know, Derek Edwards, like very smart people are like, no, you have different people involved in. There's still some level of centralization driving a creative vision, but you have a lot of like community collaboration at certain like points. And I'm like, okay, I guess. So I do think there's things like that can work. I mean, it's all where do you draw the line, right? Because you're not having pure decentralized chaos, but obviously like pure top down, super, you know, dictatorial centralized bureaucracy is a mess too, right? So it's somewhere in between, and where a DAO starts and just like a smooth running organization, you know, exists. It's sort of a hard line for me.
Yeah, I think an Ape DAO I think is like, first of all, you know, ApeCoin launched with a pretty significant, like they had a pretty significant plan when they launched. Like it's like, you know, and it is like the premier NFT project, and it was a giant launch when it launched, whatever, a year ago now. By the way, we're already past. I was going to say we passed the year ago other side, man. We kind of didn't do our anniversary.
We didn't commemorate it.
Which was like the giant suck of liquidity out of the NFT market. That was like one of the last big hurrahs. I mean, I don't know. I think that in general, government's messy in terms of everything. And I think this is one of the things you're finding here. There's a lot of drama around like who's voting for who, how people are getting votes, how people are talking about getting votes. And like, this is all the stuff you see play out in the real world when you talk about being elected or all the things here. And now you're dealing with Bored Apes doing it in a similar sort of way and using all the, you know, the Twitter, crypto Twitter type of things to kind of be involved with. I think mostly it's just like, it feels a little bit like the B team. Do you know what I mean? And I don't mean this in a way, but it's a little bit of that same vibe of like, it's just messy and it's not clean. And like, I don't know if it's the best look for anybody, if that makes the most sense.
I think the $25,000 number is kind of ridiculous. And look, I guess I don't know what you do as an Ape DAO council member or whatever, but it did kind of feel like, really, like whatever you're doing warrants, you know, a salary of $300,000.
Be interesting to have an ApeDAO council member on the show to talk about it in some ways, like just to hear like what they actually like, what the process looks like. Do you?
Well, it's what you get paid to be a board member for a company, which is sort of ridiculous, you know. Like, you know, if you're on the board of a public company, you're making like $25,000 a month to do it. Like, you're come on, you know what I mean?
Hey, those meetings are hard, Carly. You got to meet like once every month.
And I mean, even I'm like, I find that kind of silly, but I'm also like, okay, you are a board. In theory, there's like very important things that a board should be doing.
You have to vote.
Like holding a CEO to account if they're doing something bad, and like I can justify it there. Where I'm a little bit like, what here? The other thing is just you have so much voting power in the hands of some of the early, you know, your Animokas and your Yugas, that it is sort of like, what is even. That's always been my joke around some of the decentralization stuff. Like, and I love Uniswap. I actually think that they are a very impressive organization. I found out that Hayden doesn't even get like a real I think Hayden gets paid.
I've heard that.
Like, I respect. I'm like, I wouldn't do that. Like, I wouldn't mind if he was taking a real salary. But like, goddamn, I respect that he's just like works for the protocol. Like, they're an example to me of like a very early protocol that is pure. And then you had a lot of things spin up that like, you know, used the kind of terms and the ethos of a Uniswap manipulatively. With that all being said, like I do find it kind of funny because I'm pretty sure like the biggest uni holders in Uniswap can't control this, right? People whoever buys it are like, I think it was like the Harvard Endowment Fund, which is kind of crazy to think about, but it's something like very institutional, and then like A16Z, and you're like, oh yes, decentralization, you know, like
classic.
Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. And to close us out here, we're going to cut to my conversation that I had with Charles Wayn, co-founder of Galxe, who's doing some cool stuff, helping Web3 communities, build engagement, build communities, retain loyalty, engagement, et cetera, et cetera. You'll hear more right now. Charles Wayn, welcome to Overpriced JPEGs.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Carly.
I was excited to hear you're in Tokyo right now. We're going to talk about some of the international stuff later, but I'm jealous. I'm dying to get to Japan.
It's a really good city. If you go to Asia, you have to come here to explore the culture.
Well, my plan is to get there at some point. So it's just a question of when. But I want to talk about first here your recent campaign that's ongoing right now. You've partnered with Linea, which is a new zkEVM launched by Consensus, the company behind MetaMask and Fura, et cetera. They are working on this layer 2 chain called Linea. It's in its testing phases. It's very early beta phases right now. And they partnered with your company Galxe to incentivize folks to be on the network, to build and bootstrap their initial community. Talk a bit about that partnership and what you're doing with them.
Well, first of all, we're excited to co-launch this Voyage campaign with Linea. So as you mentioned, Linea is a new zkEVM built by the parent company of MetaMask Consensus. I think all layer 1 and layer 2 blockchains faces a problem, which is everybody's talking about scalability, but what do you actually offer, and what kind of scalability you can have in terms of when you have millions of users, right? And also, are you ready to onboard the next billions of users? So we've been sitting down with them many conference calls to discuss the requirements, and eventually we all know that, first of all, we really want to see the capacity of the network. So the goal is to bring as many users as possible to gain as much traction as possible for the network. And secondly, we want it to be long term, not just a one-time off campaign. So now we're at week 7 of the entire Linea voyage, and I think the traction is pretty good. In average, each weeks of Linea campaign, I think the biggest one, we had almost 3 million users participated.
And how many of those, can I ask? Well, let me back up here and just wrap up what you just said so folks really get it. So you've worked with a bunch of layer 2s in the past. You mentioned Optimism, Arbitrum. You've done some stuff with Polygon. So this is an area where you've got a lot of experience. And what you discovered here in this particular case with Linea Voyage is, okay, Linea wants to focus on obviously getting as many users testing this layer 2 as possible. And So you had these different activities that folks could do, which could be engaging with a DeFi app or bridging or doing these different tasks. And you had, I think, 1.5 million participants.
Yeah, the biggest campaign we had was over 3 million participants.
Okay, but how many of those are bots? Do you know?
Good question. Yeah, everybody wanted to ask about this. Even at the beginning, we all know, definitely a percentage of users are not human. For some campaigns that requires on-chain task, that's really technically have cost, right? So in order to complete the on-chain actions on Linea, you need to bridge your assets. Even though it's a testnet, you need to bring over testnet ETH, bridge testnet ETH to Linea into Linea testnet ETH.
Bridging in general is like not the simplest thing to work on.
And some people even swap their real assets into testnet tokens and then bridge the testnet token from mainnet to Linea. So those are costs. When we talk about bots, we want to see what exactly are the costs to be there. If say every user, you have to probably spend at least $10 in order to get in. And if you also call them bots, sure, right? But even for a real human, they won't spend that much money.
Is there a dynamic in the Linea case where there's folks are expecting an airdrop, and so folks are doing this, or somebody may have a bot farm doing this because yes, there's this upfront cost, but there's an expected airdrop down the line?
I think there are definitely expectations, and to me, I think if there will be a token in the future, if tokenomics, a token itself will sustain in the long term, airdrop will be a necessary part of it. And I think in the future, every token when they launch, it has to come with airdrop because it's just a Web3 native way to build their user base. So I think there are definitely expectations, but I don't think any team will want to promise anything before they launch the token.
So getting back to this core, your most popular campaign had over 3 million participants. I think this Linea campaign has had at times 1.5 million participants. I mean, those are some of the numbers that grabbed me. And I was like, this is an interesting conversation to have. We don't know what percent are bots. We know some percent are certainly bots. Or you do know. You have a hard number? He just gave me a look for anybody listening on the podcast.
There are some third-party solutions, they offer analytics for this, but it's all subjective. It depends on everyone's standard. But recently, they also introduced a new campaign where you can claim the most loyalty points. And the requirement to get that is you either have Galxe Passport or Gitcoin Passport. It's an identity solution where it asks you to connect your social accounts, check how many ENS you have, how many POAPs you have, and then give you a score. And the Galxe Passport is an on-chain KYC solution where you literally need to go through a standard KYC process to upload your photo ID, do liveness check, and then get the soulbound token minted. So from that campaign, we saw a total of 250K participants.
And they had to KYC, so you can be confident they're not bots.
Either KYC or have a Gitcoin Passport score over 20.
Interesting. Okay, so that's still hundreds of thousands, which feels
right.
good in this time when sometimes it feels like nobody's participating in this space anymore. Yeah. So let me ask you this now. As we round out this piece and using Linea as a case study of some of what you offer, you've talked about these steps that folks are going through, participating with DeFi apps, whatever the various tasks are in the different weeks here. What is the reward at the end or the reward along the way that folks are doing this for?
Linea used one of our recently launched a new feature called loyalty points. So loyalty points is a feature we allow every projects to build their own loyalty point system using Galxe. Those points right now are just paper balance, but we're also updating it. In the long term, we may turn it into a tokenized loyalty points. We think that will have a lot of interesting utilities there. And there's a leaderboard. Everyone can see their own points. You can see the top 100 users. So there's nothing promised. What will be the campaign? There are airdrop. There are NFT for sure, but no airdrop promised at all.
Yeah, and then the Linea team can determine how they want to reward folks for their various loyalty point levels.
And then decide what kind of rewards eventually they can use loyalty points to redeem or claim.
So you've mentioned a bunch of the companies you've worked for. We just talked about Linea as a specific example. What are your top 2, maybe 3 takeaways for how companies build and engage with their community? What should folks be doing?
The top priority, which is essential for starting up a business, is finding who is your target audience. And then, what do you want this target audience to do? And what are the requirements to become this target audience? What do you think the requirement will be to meet your target audience standard? So that's the time when you launch any kind of initiatives with Galxe or any Quest platform, you want to define the requirement first. For example, you have to hold 0.01 ETH, and then your account age has to be over a year. If you want to target this audience, sure, you can easily set up a credential on Galxe, and that's what we have a plug and play dashboard experience for pro users, for brands, for projects to easily set it up directly from the dashboard. Once you meet this requirement, I want you to do something, right? Okay, I want you to come to my app to list this NFT asset, right? Or to bid, right? To create a bidding pool. So those are the call to actions. That's also part of the requirements. So once you have those find out, then I think it's a great time to launch. And then on the other hand, what kind of rewards you want to give to them. What we are offering right now is we offer NFTs, badges, loyalty points, Discord roles, token rewards, custom rewards, or allow list. And then I can come up with a weight or format to calculate everyone's airdrop allocation, and then eventually you do an airdrop, you do a giveaway, you do a lock drop, whatever you prefer. But I think that's our experience working with 2,500 partners across different sectors. It's always working.
Last question, because something else I find interesting for y'all is you work, with you have a lot of users who are international. And I know I was looking at some of the stats from your team and just using the last traffic to your website in the last 30 days as a proxy. The majority of the traffic was coming from Hong Kong, Singapore, and then you had the US and elsewhere. And I'm really interested in talking more about international markets. I'm obviously US based, so I tend to be US centric, but given everything that's happening in the US, feels like it's a very fraught time for crypto. And there's some really positive signs in Asia, for example. So would love to just get your thoughts broadly on appealing to international markets, working in international markets versus targeting or working in the US.
In our experience, projects or teams based in the US are the best quality. They build the best product, especially in the past 2 years. But we also see the trend that the increase of users come from Asia and Europe. One of the reasons are regulations. The other thing is Web3 is different from other traditional startup. Web3 builders, they need to thinking globally from day one, because maybe from day one your users will come from other country. You're not only selling a product only to US users. You're not only offering service to US users. It's a decentralized world. We've seen increased amount of users coming from Hong Kong because of the regulation, maybe, as well as Singapore, Japan, Korea. China is not friendly to crypto as well, so I will skip that. But also Southeast Asia, like Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, they have a huge amount of users. But in Southeast Asia, European country, crypto are more, people are more friendly to crypto. And because of the infrastructure, because of the regulation, I guess that's why. And I think building globally is really important for all Web3 builders. from day one.
Charles, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it, and excited to continue to track Galxe's journey.
Thank you, Carly. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that is the show. Happy weekend, everybody. We will see you next week.
Bye-bye, y'all.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.